Hey everybody, today we are going to talk about running shoes. So we'll go over a couple things. When do you need to replace them? What's the best shoe? And what do you do when you're in pain? So first question I like to ask all my runners is, how old are your running shoes? So when people come in like this, walking with a shoe with a little hole in them, I like to say, are these the shoes that you run in, or are these the pair that you cut your grass in? Because after a year, you really need to be replacing your running shoes. I like to use 1 year as a minimum, but if you're putting more miles on during the week, you want to replace your running shoes every 300 to 500 miles. The reason being, even if you're kind of a low runner and you've got a pair of shoes that's maybe only 2 years old, but you just started running, right? So you haven't used them very much. But over time, that tissue, the quality of the material that makes up the shoe breaks down, even if it's just sitting on the shelf. So again, to protect your hips, to protect your joints and your tendons, you want to make sure you're replacing your shoes at least every year or 500 miles. So question 2, what type of running shoe is best and what type is best for me? There's been a lot of research done over the last few years, and what they're finding is that there is no perfect running shoe. Our bodies are all different, so our shoe needs are all different. But even that being said, there's not a specific shoe that's best for your specific foot type. So if you have a little bit more of a rigid foot or a high arch, or if you have a little bit of a flat and more flexible foot or a low arch, it doesn't mean that you need a shoe built for that foot type. Again, they've done some research, some studies showing that if you pair the right foot with the right shoe, is there less risk of injury, or vice versa if it's not a paired shoe per foot. The injury risks really don't change. So what's more important than what your foot type is how your foot feels in the shoe. So what I like to recommend is when you're picking out a running shoe, especially for the first time, you go to a running shoe store, right? You want to make sure that you're not going down the aisles at Target picking out a shoe that might not even be a running shoe, right? This is more of a lifting shoe. It's going to be super rigid. It's not something I want to take out with me on the hard pavement. But rather at the running shoe store, again, they can give you a pair to try out, and then if you're lucky, they've got a treadmill. They'll let you take it out on the sidewalk if the weather's nice and try it out. Again, what your number one concern is how do you feel in the shoe? Is it comfortable? Does it feel good in your feet, in your knees, in your hips? And then you come back and you give that expert your feedback. You say, it felt good, but it's a little off. My toes feel a little pinchy. So that expert at the running shoe store is going to be able to tell you, okay, well, let's try a different model, right? Or let's try a different brand, one with a wider toe box, and see how that feels. Try it out, give them some feedback, and well, this one's a little bit better, but now my heel feels a little bit sore. Again, that person at the shoe store is going to be able to say, okay, let's try now this shoe and see how it feels. Again, what you might find is the perfect fit and shoe for you today is not always the one that you want to keep forever. Again, I've had a couple patients, clients, they tell me, I run in the Brooks Glycerin. I've been running in them for 5 years. I just order it online every time I need a new pair. Not a bad thing, but again, our bodies change over time. The shoes change over time, and what might have been the best shoe for you then, maybe there's a better option today. Or maybe your running has gotten more efficient, your form has gotten better, so where you need support has changed. The other reason that I like to say every couple years, go back to the store, try out a couple different pairs, or if you're putting on a lot of miles, it might be good to have 2 pairs, 2 slightly different styles. Both should still feel comfortable, but again, a lot of running injuries are overuse injuries. So if you're always in the same pair of shoes, you're always getting the same support, you might be putting more pressure on one side of the foot, or you might be kind of putting your foot in the same position over time for a long period of time. So if you can slightly change up the pressure, the support you get through your feet, it's also going to make your body adapt and be more adaptable out on those uneven surfaces, like if you're doing trail running. Finally, what do you do if you're in pain? Is there a best shoe based on an injury? Again, not necessarily. If you're having pain, I would start out with a PT assessment. If you've got someone local who does some performance running, figure out, is it something you can correct with postural changes, strength mobility changes, or even assessing your form and making slight tweaks. But in the meantime, if you want to stay running and something isn't feeling good, well, if you're having pain in your foot, in the bones, in your Achilles tendon or shin pain, you might be better with a shoe with a little bit more of a heel height. So again, if you've been like barefoot running, let's say something you've been doing for a long time, and now you're having more of the shin pain, bone pain. If you get something with a little more of a heel to toe drop, right? So it's a little wider at the back, a little more cushion. It's gonna help with some of those shocks through those bony tissues, or unload your Achilles a little bit. So that might be more comfortable. On the other hand, if you're having anterior knee pain or hip pain, that higher shoebox is gonna put a little bit more pressure on the front of that kneecap. So something with a little bit lower heel toe drop might be more comfortable when you're starting to kind of get back from a knee injury or something more proximal like a hip tendonitis. Okay, so again, big recap, replacing your shoes every couple 100 miles or every year, making sure you find a shoe that feels comfortable in your runs. And if it doesn't, see if you can take it back and find something else. And then number 3, if you're in pain, first try to figure out where the pain is coming from. Can you correct it without having to buy a new pair of shoes? Or, you know, if you wanted to stay running while you're doing your rehab and you want a shoe that's going to support you during that, those are a couple tips you can stick with.